Hi everybody. Here at Trucking, we love old trucks, but especially we love the stories that come along with them. Now right there, that's a 1971 Chevy C10 and it belongs to my dad. It has a great backstory. We're gonna tell it to you. But we also wanna hear from you. Do you have a super cool old truck? We wanna see it. We might even come out and interview you about it. So go in the description box below. You'll see an email and please submit your story to us so we can tell your old truck story. Right now, let's find out the story behind this C10.
So today we're looking at my 1971 Chevrolet Cheyenne. But before we get into that, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Howard Elmer. A lot of you know me, but also a lot of you only know me as Steven's dad. Sure, that's one of my great accomplishments, but hey, I do have a 30-year career in automotive journalism to look back on. I've been writing about trucks and RVs and motorsports and power sports, like I said, for 30 years. If you're Canadian, you may have seen me on motoring television, and I'm still there doing all their truck reviews, and I'm moving forward now, basically just helping Steven out, which is what he keeps telling everybody. So when you have a look at this truck, you'll notice that this Cheyenne specifically is a Super 10. Now that was an option level that was introduced mid-71, only lasted through 1972, and it was the bells and whistles version of this truck. So without further ado, my story. It's fairly straightforward. It's very similar to a lot of people who look for classic vehicles. I'm 14 years old, and my dad has a Chevrolet C10, which is his shop truck. We used to own a machine shop in Toronto. And Saturdays were me and my brothers were hauled into the shop, and we had to sweep, clean the chips off the milling machines, do whatever other dirty jobs that he had for us while he was working in the drafting room. Now, unlike my brothers who pretty much towed the line, first chance I got, I swiped the keys, I got out in the back, took that truck, and drove it around the parking lot, teaching myself how to drive standard. That was a base model truck. It had the 3-on-the-tree transmission, and I'm pretty sure I came close to burning the clutch out. However, that's what I learned how to drive on, and I did it all in secret. And so, 30, 40 years later, when somebody said, what truck meant the most to you, because by that time I've owned a dozen, I'd tell them, there was that one Chevy, that one C10 that my dad had. And that's how we make those connections with certain vehicles. So it's a short story, but hey, that's my story. But that's also the reason that I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, a retired GM engineer who lives in Michigan, used to help me out when I was doing mechanical things, because I'm more of a shade tree mechanic than engineer. And I would constantly call up Mike and say, Mike, I'm rebuilding this motor, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And every once in a while, he'd get sick of giving me advice, and he'd say, Howard, just throw it all in a box and bring it down, and I'll fix it for you. And you know what? I took him up on that. So that's pre-COVID, back when I could do that, just throw it all in a box and head to Michigan. And we were sitting around Mike's shop when we were putting an old Ford flathead V8 back together, and I started telling him about my dad and the Chevy, and he looked at me and he said, Howard, I know a guy. And I went, well, what do you know? He says, I know a guy, another engineer, a friend of mine who retired, and he bought a Cheyenne. You know what? I'll give him a call. And he did that. That particular guy, Gary, was out in Wyoming, and I got in touch with him. We sent some pictures back and forth, but it's very nerve-wracking to buy something off a photograph. As luck would have it, Mike phoned me up and said, you know what, I'm heading out that way to visit some family. He did that. 2 weeks later, he called me up. He says, I've been out to see Gary. I've seen the truck. He says, and I only got one thing to say. If you don't buy it, I will. And frankly, I trust Mike enough that that was good enough for me, and I bought it sight unseen. So in May of 2012, my wife and I flew out to Denver. Gary came and picked us up, and we went and got the truck. It's only ever had two owners, Gary and a fellow by the name of Dale Moore. And Dale Moore owned that truck for 35 years. And the reason he owned that truck for 35 years, that's the story that I want to tell you, because I thought it was just such a great story. I got to meet Dale And he actually told me that story over lunch. So in 1970, his father, a farmer in Ohio, went to the doctor because he'd been coughing a lot, and the doctor said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, but you've got lung cancer. You got less than a year to live." He left the doctor's office, drove to the Chevy dealership, walked in, said, "I want a new truck." And he sat down and he ticked all the boxes, including getting this upgraded Super 10 package. A year later, he was dead, and his son Dale had just come home from serving in Vietnam. His mom said, "Listen, I can't pay for this truck." Dale took over the payments, and he kept that truck for the next 35 years. He too became a GM employee. The truck spent most of its life in Colorado and California. And when Dale retired, well, finally he gave it up, sold it to a friend, Gary, in Wyoming, and that's who I bought it from. And I'm proud of the fact that I've had it for 8 years. I stay in touch with those guys because this truck is like family. It's a family member to each and every one of those people with that backstory, plus mine. And you may know this if you've ever bought a classic vehicle. When you go in and you tell the owner of a classic vehicle what you're looking for and the reason that that truck touches you, that's the reason he sells it to you, not for the money. And that's the way this truck has been for me.
Tell us the story about bringing the truck back to Canada.
So I bought the truck, as I'd said, literally sight unseen from Gary out in Wyoming, and then planned on going out and picking it up in May of 2012, which is the date that my wife chose because she said, "I don't want to do it in July when it's too hot." As it turned out, there was an unprecedented heat wave, so she didn't get what she wanted. We rolled down Highway 80 with the windows open for most of the way across the country. However, one of the cool things is that, of course, I had a couple of months between buying it and picking it up. So I'm telling a lot of people that I know about this truck. I know a lot of people, obviously, within the automotive industry. And a couple of the GM people really reacted to this. And they said, "Well, have you figured out where the truck was built? Have you looked at the VIN?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I have. And actually, I know it was built in Flint, Michigan." And they said, "So how old is this truck?" And I told them, and they said, and it's been rebuilt and it's been painted. And I said, "No, this truck is a survivor," which it still is to this day. Never been painted, never been worked on, engine's never been cracked open. Other than the maintenance items and tires on this truck, it's the way it looked the day that it came off the line. So next thing I know, I get calls from the Flint factory and from the UAW people, and they say, "Would you bring the truck to Flint on your way home? We think it would be wicked cool to have one of our trucks come back to the factory almost 40 years after it was built." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So initially it was going to be a little meet and greet, grin and grab outside of the factory. By the time I got there, they brought us inside. They shut down the shift. We had a couple of hundred people lined up. They actually brought in guys from the retirees, guys that actually worked on the line in 1971. And throughout that entire thing, I just kept looking around and going, what is it about this truck that touches people like that? That they actually give a crap about a 40-year-old pickup truck. And yet, there you have it. It just made everybody smile, including me. We crossed the border. We headed home to Ontario. The truck lives now in Norval, Ontario, and every year out she comes out of the barn in April. I keep it out until I know it's going to snow. As anybody who's followed Truck King knows, we make trucks do what they're supposed to do. We don't go to the store and pick up a bag of milk and say, "Hey, there's a truck test." Now, we tow with them, we put payload in them, we run them off-road, and I've been running trucks like that since I was 16 years old. So, despite the fact that it's a wonderful old truck, if I got a load to go to the dump, this is what's going to the dump. Because frankly, it's an 8-foot bed. It only comes up to here on me, and it's easy to load, it's easy to unload. And the guy at the dump at the weigh scale station, he loses it every time I go in there. And he's like, "Can't believe you're putting garbage and brush into this beautiful truck." So my standing joke with him is I say, "Look, I'm poor, man. It's all I can afford is an old truck." So, But I have always used my trucks like they're intended to be, which is another reason that guys feel so strongly about their trucks. Because let's face it, anything that helps you do whatever it is that you do, you get to love it, particularly when it doesn't let you down.
And he wasn't lying about working this truck. Those bins of firewood right there, we cut and split them last year. They're dry now, and one of them's got to go home. So we're loading her into the 71. Let's do it.
So everybody, that's the story of my 1971 Chevy Cheyenne, and I'd love to hear your stories. There's nothing I love better than getting together with somebody who really digs whatever it is that they drive. But in this particular case, it's trucks. And I know there's lots of classic truck owners out there, and I'd like to hear your story. So we've got an email address for you. It's real simple. It's hey, H-E-Y, @truckking.ca. Shoot me a note. Tell me what you got. And then I'll get in touch and let's talk about your story. If you're nearby, maybe we can hook up and feature you on the channel. If you're a little further away, maybe we can do something remotely. But either way, we love truck stories and I want to hear yours. Okay, everybody, so that's it for this video. We're hoping to hear from all you classic truck owners. And in the meantime, please go below, hit like, hit subscribe, and keep coming back to Truck King to see trucks doing what trucks do best.